Well, hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. Thanks for finding me here in the crowded world of orchid YouTube videos. Now, I try to grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without any help from greenhouses or grow lights or humidifiers. Really just me and them, mostly outside, one or two inside these days, struggling along or not at all. So if they sound like your conditions, hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday, amateur ramblings, but they might help you in your orchid journey. And today that brings us very firmly at the door of, yes, Sarcochilus. It is late spring and all my Sarcochilus are out. And what a fantastic show it is too. Now, these ones are mostly open and coming into bud. I've still got a ton that are just in bud that haven't opened. And up here behind me is Sarcochilus hartmannii, which is one of the species which is just going over. That always tends to open first. But I thought we'd just do a little quick refresher because I know a lot of people outside of Australia are really interested in growing Sarcochilus. So it's always good, I think, to just refresh with our knowledge. And I feel I've learnt a lot in the last couple of years. Not least of which because I made a video with Dan, who's a specialist amateur grower of Sarcochilus a couple of years ago. I'll link it up here. Dan grows Sarcochilus, but also Masdevallia in the same spot. And he has the most incredible bench of flowering Sarcochilus when they're all out. It's stunning. I had complete bench envy. So that is kind of what I'm trying to get to. Many of my plants are still a little smaller, so they're not covered in blooms, but hopefully I will get there. So a quick summary, Sarcochilus, Eastern Australian species group. So up the East Coast from sort of the north of Victoria, my state, all the way up. So a variety of conditions. Generally though, on the shadier side, so not direct light, although hartmannii up here, the species is more lithophytic and so is found in spots which do get direct sun. The leaves will very much get damaged though, and mine certainly has, but we'll get to that in a minute. So I think the first thing that I have learned is that these orchids want slightly different care to Australian dendrobium orchids. And back in the day, I did think, oh, they're basically the same. But no, Australian dendrobiums need brighter direct sun, like direct sun in the early part of the morning and then a little bit of protection in the afternoon from the harsh afternoon sun here in Australia. Sarcochilus, though, need more protection than that and slightly more shade. Otherwise, they will burn and their leaves will look terrible. So that was, or has been, my first, I think, really major learning over the last few years. They do still need bright indirect light, particularly in winter. Otherwise, they won't bloom for you. And if you imagine here in the Southern Hemisphere, in winter, the light is much lower and is penetrating the areas where these orchids grow. Hence, they tend to get more light, and that really stimulates the flowers along with the shift in the season. I think the light thing is very important, which was something I just kind of glibly ignored. The other interesting thing, speaking of Australian dendrobiums, is that all my Aussie dendrobiums are now done. I mean, bar one, it's got a few flowers hanging on. So they are very much late winter, early spring. And then the Sarcochilus take over from sort of mid-spring through till late spring and early summer. So you kind of get this succession of Australian natives if you've got a few in your collection. And it's a really beautiful thing, such amazing colours. Following my visit with Dan a few years ago, there are some things I just want to go over because I have learnt them. The first thing was watering. Now, Dan waters his, was watering his a lot more than I was at the time. I tended to think, because they're quite fleshy, succulent leaves, no pseudobulb, but really tough, very tough, strong leaves, I just assumed that they were quite drought tolerant and could certainly deal with less watering. Now, in the wild, many of the species are lithophytes or epiphytes or a little bit of both. So they're used to getting a lot of water, it running past them, evaporating, etc., etc. However, in cultivation, things are a little different. And Dan just waters his a lot more often. So I really made a concerted effort to water mine. And one of the ones that I had in the wrong spot in our previous house. It was quite high up, getting really bright light. And because it was high up and sort of out of the way, hard for me to water, was this one. And it got incredibly dehydrated and really wrinkly leaves when I spotted it. So anyway, I then just put it in a spot where it had more shade, or gentler light, let's say, because it still needs bright indirect light. And then I just watered it. I really focused on watering it and it pinged back. So I will say too, Sarcochilus is one of those orchid types that you really can bring back from the dead. A shriveled little bit of nothing with some shriveled prune-like leaves and no roots, and it can come back. So Don't write off a Sarcochilus if you love it and it's not looking great. It can come back like a phoenix. So if you have got one that is pretty much rootless, I would maybe just rest it on the top of some sphagnum and weigh it down with a few big pieces of bark just to keep it in place. And very soon an aerial root will emerge and either go in or hover around the surface of the medium. So yeah, you can revive these. They're amazingly tough. So this is the first thing. Dehydrated Sarcochilus will come back, and this is case in point. And this one has quite a large open flower, but they haven't opened fully yet, which is one of the disadvantages. It needs another couple of days of sun to really open, but it's a very broad flower with a beautiful red detailing inside the lip. Now, the other orchid, which I adore, is this one here. And you can probably see kind of an odd twisted form it takes. This one was completely stripped by slugs or snails. So all the new growth, all the leaves are eaten, the new ones. The old ones are too tough, but the young ones are green and juicy. And this one was sitting on the floor in our previous house, and so it was very accessible as a food source to slugs and snails. So it was completely shredded, but it has really grown back. It's got these amazing, it's sort of rebranched, there you go, and produced these wonderful flowers, which have a really, really deep burgundy red interior to them. So the color palette does tend to be white with that little bit of red. So hartmannii, one of the species, very much like that. But as you can see, the hybridizing has really been pushing the size of the flowers, the upright nature of the raceme, and the color. And yellow was one I particularly wanted. Now, none of these really have cultivar names, but this yellow one is a cross between Culnura Duet Golden Spark and Culnura Taser Bethany. Goodness me. Now, the back of that tag, there you go, Barita Orchids is a company in Australia that specializes in Sarcochilus. I'll put the link below. There are a few online. If you're in the States or in Britain, I'm not sure, you'll have to Google around. But you can actually get flasks of Sarcochilus from some of these growers in Australia and export them. It's one of the few things we can ship out of the country is flasks. And I think Barita do sell flasks, so they can ship those to the States or Britain. So bear that in mind if you want to have a go. And Sarcochilus, not that difficult to grow from flask orchids. And if you want to know how to deflask orchids, look at the video here that I made with Michael Coker, who is perhaps Victoria's king of orchids. He is a great grower, has a wealth of experience with deflasking orchids. So I made a great video with him. So have a look at that. So if you are outside of this country and you want to grow some more sarcs, have a go at a flask. So that yellow one was a color I particularly was keen on adding because yellow is just not a typical color for these orchids. And then this one here, which is white with those sort of tangerine interiors, really, really beautiful. And then this one here, which is a really beautiful apricot color. And that was a seedling. And look how quickly it's flowered. And what you can perhaps also see is all those new little plantlets growing around the base. So Sarcochilus are a fantastic orchid type to buy as seedlings because you will get a flower probably within a year or 2 years. So they'll flower when they're in quite a juvenile state. And then in the second year, they will start putting up secondary and third growth points. So very quickly, you get quite a bulky plant. They don't sort of have an off season either. They're kind of continually growing. So when it comes to watering and feeding, you sort of want to do it all year. I do dial it really down in winter because they don't dry out as quickly, but I still water them. Food-wise, I do a topical application in spring. So a couple of weeks ago, I did it of a slow-release fertilizer. General flowering plant fertilizer is fine. And then throughout the warmer seasons, I do give them a liquid fertilizer. When I remember, maybe once a week, once a fortnight. And that can be either a liquid flowering plant fertilizer or more of a tonic that's sort of a seaweed-based or perhaps the runoff from a worm farm, something like that. Whatever it is, dilute it more than it says on the instructions because too much is too much. Now, a couple of other plants that we looked at in other videos, this one is a beauty. So hartmannii up there, one of the species, and Fitzgeraldii is another one. And this is a hybrid between Fitzgeraldii and a cultivar called Riverdine. And it has just the prettiest of pink flowers and slightly open. This one does like slightly more shade. So Fitzgeraldii comes from quite shadier spots and one to keep moist all the time. So I'm thrilled with that. Actually feeling it, it's a little dry. Now we moved 2-3 months ago, and I must say many of my Sarcochilus did not do very well because I just had to abandon them to some degree. So a lot of mine got sun damage because they were in direct sun and they weren't watered properly. So they've had a bit of a rough time, unfortunately. But as I said, they are an orchid that kicks back really quickly. So my hartmannii was getting too much sun. There's a lot of sun damage on the leaves, but it will ping back. The unfortunate thing is those leaves last years. So for years, you are reminded of your ill care of your orchid, if in fact you have. Now, this one here, I just wanted to show you. Firstly, look at those beautiful, very open red flowers. Absolutely delicious, quite pendant racemes. Whereas this one, for example, much more upright. So a lot of the breeding is actually about getting some to be more upright and some to be more pendulous. This is a stunner. But what I wanted to show you is, can you see in there, there's quite a few dead leaves. So I'll just pull one off. There you go. So there is a dead leaf, yellow and brown. Now, someone once asked me about the leaves dying on Sarcochilus. Now, you shouldn't get many, maybe 2 or 3 a year on a plant this size, if that. So the leaves last a long time. And obviously, when they desiccate and go sort of yellowy brown like this, they're done and dusted. Now, logically too, that should be towards the base of the plant, so the older leaves. If you've got this happening at the top of your plant or in the newer growth areas, you've got a problem. And who knows what that might be, but you'll need to investigate it. So leaves yellowing and dying towards the base of the plant, maybe 2 or 3 a year, not a problem, don't worry, at any point in the year. Because basically these orchids, as I said, don't have a sort of an off season. They're growing continually. So you will get leaves dying and dropping at any point in the year. Just shouldn't be a huge number, and it shouldn't be from the top, from the new growth points. And the other thing I've noticed in here too is that we've got a lot of old flower spikes which we should trim out because it is unbecoming to leave them in there. So that's really the only maintenance you need to do. Just remove the old leaves from time to time and trim off any dead flower spikes at the end of the season. God, this has got, I think, 2 years worth. Now, another question someone asked me, and maybe this is a good one to show you. So this is a plant that did not do very well in a move. Look, it's been sun damaged, but still flowered for me. But what you can see are those aerial roots there. So a lot like a Phalaenopsis. Now, someone once asked me about repotting, whether you should bury those. Yes, no. Essentially, it's fine that there's aerial roots out and there will be roots in the medium. So when you're repotting, try and replicate what's been going on. So if your plant has got roots underground, then pot it like that and leave the aerial ones outside. If you do happen to bury an aerial one, the world won't end. They will thrive and do their rooty business. So don't worry too much about it. But it's totally fine to leave your aerial roots just out there, waving in the world and gathering moisture. Now, in my video with Dan, he just uses a medium bark to pot his. Now, I often will do that too, but I sometimes use out of the bag orchid mix. So this is the pre-mixed orchid mix that you get from hardware stores. It says orchid compost or orchid mix. And here in Australia, the one I get is sort of medium bark with more sort of granulation in it. So it's like there's sort of 1/10 of regular potting compost to 9/10 of medium bark. So still free draining, but a little bit granular. So imagine these are epiphytes, lithophytes. They're growing in nooks where there's a gathering of leaf litter and organic matter. So, you know, they want something to get their roots into. They have very strong fleshy roots, a lot like Phalaenopsis and like Vandas, which they are not dissimilar to in their growth habits in many ways. So a good chunky medium for them to get their roots into is a good idea. And repotting, because they don't have an off season, you could kind of do it at any point. I would avoid doing it when they're coming into bud and into flower. So that's going to be sort of late winter. The best time would be probably when the flowers have just finished, which is going to be late spring, early summer, or heading up through to autumn. But if you have to pot it for whatever reason, because you dropped it or you bought one that looks really scabby, you can pot it at any point. But if it's in winter, just don't overwater it when you've repotted it. Just let it settle in. Don't keep it bone dry, but don't keep it wringing wet until it's really established. And now, plant lovers, just a little sidebar. This is a nursery, Tesla, in Australia, that sells pretty stock in trade, perennials, bulbs, whatever. Really great nursery based in Victoria. Amazing growing space that they have. And interestingly, some of the growers I've met on my other channel with Stephen Ryan, the horticulturalists, are in production of some very interesting species of different shrubs and plants for Tesla. So they do a lot of work in propagating and hybridizing new plants. Anyway, got the catalog as I always do, and I'm, full of perennials and bulbs. I was astounded to see orchids. Now, they often have cymbidiums, but look what is on this page. Bulbophyllums. Now, these are all warm growers, tropical growers, so they're not good for me because you really do need a warm, humid environment to grow them. But who would have thought some really great bulbophyllums? This one here is the species from which Elizabeth Ann Bockleberry is derived, which is an orchid that I do grow quite well and flowers regularly for me indoors in my home environment. So if you're in Australia, have a look at Tesla's website. I haven't checked to see if these are all still available because they probably had very limited numbers. But if you're after some interesting bulbophyllums, Tesla is a really great company, so I'm amazed they've got them. And not only that, Stanhopea. I mean, who would have thought, honestly, it's kind of incredible. So the Stanhopea is there. They've got 3 different hybrids. So there you are. Now, I've made Stanhopea videos, and most of them do well outside all year here in Melbourne, so that would be an easier buy. I'm kind of surprised there are such specialist orchids in a very mainstream catalogue, because I do fear that most people will kill these really quickly. But anyway, if you know what you're doing and you're after Stanhopea or Bulbophyllum, have a look at Tesla. And there is even a Masdevallia. So I don't know quite where this has all come from, but I'm very pleased with them. It's always quite an issue to find orchids. So some of these come from Burrito orchids, and Mount Benac also do Sarcochilus. No affiliation with them, it just popped in the mail and I couldn't believe what I saw. So there we are, Sarcochilus season. So yes, I've got a lot more to come, which is great. And hopefully next year, they will all have settled into this spot, getting better care, and they won't all be so sun damaged. And hopefully they'll all love me a little bit more and I'll get better blooms. So we'll check in again. So this hasn't been a stellar season for me, I must say, but I have added plants since the last Sarcochilus video I made. So there are certainly some beauties here which are delicious. So there you go, plant lovers. I hope our Sarcochilus stop has been of interest to you. I know a lot of people in the States grow Sarcochilus, particularly in California. So good luck with yours. I hope they're loving life. Great environment to be growing them over there. And they certainly would do very well inside as long as they're getting the right light in winter. Now, plant lovers, who knows what we'll be doing next week, but I'm sure it'll be orchid related. Well, it has to be, obviously. So if you want to know, hit subscribe. I post every week on a Friday, very amateur ramblings. But I hope this has been of interest. I do love Sarcochilus thyme. They're just stunning. Very, very easy orchid to grow. The flowers last a reasonable amount of time. They only flower once in the year though, so it's a lot of orchid for only one flowering, I have to say. But if you get a couple of plants of different colors, it looks amazing. And some of mine haven't opened yet, so you will get, a month to 6 weeks of bloom time, depending on when your particular hybrid blooms. And there are a million hybrids now, so many cultivars going for the size, the openness to flower, the upright nature, the raceme, the color. It's a beautiful group of orchids, well worth the effort if you can get yourself some. And it will be well worth the effort joining me next week. Who knows what I'll be doing, but whatever it is, I look forward to seeing you. So wherever you are, take care. I hope all's well in your orchid world, and I look forward to seeing you next week.